I was thinking about, Lanny mentioned innovation, and I was thinking about the projects that board members mentioned to you today, the reading program, the book club in the box, the outreach at the shelters, the first Tuesdays. All of those things have come into being in about 5 years or less. So there's always new things going on. It's never the same old, same old. Of course, the same is true at the library. Things change at the library to keep up with everything. So it's always something different, and it's always kind of exciting. And to that, we really welcome your ideas. So if you have an idea of something that you think would be good to do in the library, or Friends of the Library could take on as a project, do contact us or talk to a board member or get on the board yourself and introduce the idea, because all of these things that I just mentioned came from your ideas. I'm looking at the people here who came up with the idea for Book Club in the Box, came up with the reading program, came up with the first Tuesday book sale. So please, if you think of something, you need to mention it to us.
I'd like to really thank Sally Hillis, who I keep trying to hire as my personal administration assistant, because she's so organized and the SLO Library Friends for inviting me here today. I feel very honored and very nervous. I'm aware that this is my State of the Union, this is my Super Bowl, and I better not screw it up. I'm usually talking to 6 people in the library, sitting at the end of their chairs. But when I started to think about my presentation, I started to think about my writing journey in terms of the places that hold books. The books are my products, the libraries. The working title I came up with this is a bit long-winded, but it says it pretty well. From Nancy Drew to Bella Kowalski, with library stops in between, my journey as a reader and writer of mysteries. Obituary writer Bella Kowalski has been with me for 3, soon to be 4 books, and I'll talk more about her later. Okay, when I started to think about what I would talk about, I began to think about my writing journey in terms of libraries. I love the libraries, and I'm not pandering to the audience. I'd rather go to the library than shop, and that's saying a lot. A big part is anticipation, like shopping. Something you requested is in, or maybe you find something you can't resist on a shelf. That's better than a treasure hunt at a thrift store. However, I have to say regarding that, Clark's, $20, Mission Thrift Store. I pop into the Los Osos library at least 2 times a week. And Chase and Liz and the rest of them just kind of roll their eyes, like, well, here she is again. Can you imagine what would happen today if we tried to start a federal or state system of lending free books? Oh my God, horrorism, socialism. But libraries that we've seen today are so much more than shelves of free books. They serve as community gathering places. And I'm reminded of that every single time I walk into one. After I became an author, my first presentation was at the Fontana Library. And I remember it was so busy, it was early evening, especially with young people using free computers. Again, what a concept! Computers free for the using. I hope as ebooks grow, and I think they will, that libraries don't become little ATM machines, but remain community gathering places. Moving right along, the first stop on my journey was in the mid-40s at the Detroit Public Library, a beautiful Italian Renaissance building whose architect was Cass Gilbert. He also designed the Supreme Court building. I found out that Detroit has the 20th largest library system in the U.S. Despite its current problems, there's a lot to like in Detroit, including Belle Isle, which was designed by Frederick Olmsted of Golden Gate Park in Central Park, Maine. Belle Isle, as you'll see, is in a couple of my books. You can also see that very early I was affected, and still am, by a sense of place. Okay, still in Detroit, female mystery writers of a certain age have all pretty much had the same journey. And that journey starts with, guess who? Nancy Drew, who just celebrated her 85th birthday. How could that be, Nancy? How could you be 85 years old? Pretty much every Saturday, my parents, I was an only child, took me by streetcar or the occasional cab, if they were flush that week, to the downtown Detroit Public Library, the one I just discussed, where I'd select either one or two books. I wasn't allowed more for reasons that are unclear to me. Afterwards, we'd go to Fred Sanders for a treat, a chocolate soda with chocolate ice cream for me, and then home to read our books in our nice, warm, rented upper flat. You don't forget this stuff as an adult. You just don't forget it. It just stays with you. I don't remember who introduced me to Nancy. It could have been my parents, who themselves were very avid readers, or it could have been a helpful librarian. It could have been at my Catholic school. In any case, it was a life-changing event. I used to have an interview with Ned Nickerson, Nancy's sidekick, on my website. Maybe I'll update and repost it. In the original version, Ned and Nancy are now living in sin in Sun City. Maybe in the new one they'll go into witness protection. Fast forward 20 years to Ontario, California, where I moved with my husband and young son. By that time, I graduated from Nancy Drew to Agatha Christie and Ian Fleming. I miss seeing it, but the Ontario Library started as a Carnegie building. But again, that just blew me away. In those days, I didn't know a Carnegie Library from a hole in the wall. And it had been torn down by the time I got there. But I used to take Sean, my oldest son, to the temporary library, which was in an old house, which he found interesting in itself because, as a toddler, it had lots of nooks and crannies to crawl around in. We had no public transportation in Ontario during the JFK administration, and only one car, a truck, which my husband took to work. So Sean and I walked everywhere. I remember how his little legs would get so red from walking the 6 blocks to the library. But you know what? Today he's a reader, as are all my sons. I know I'm preaching to the crowd here, but this early exposure works. It really does. And all these reading programs in the schools and poetry in the schools and all that. It just blows me away. Life moved on as lives do, and after having 2 more sons and a divorce somewhat later, I went to work as a computer programmer in aerospace at Lockheed. This was 1968, the height of the Cold War. I had an idea for a thriller born of that experience. I had no top secret security clearance, but people around me did. And they used to frequent a neighborhood bar they called Area 51, a secret military facility in Nevada. These people knew something I didn't, which gave birth to a series of what-if thoughts. What if they worked for Area 51? What if one of them was a Russian spy? What if that spy was discovered by a single mother with 3 kids who badly needed a job? I'm still at work on those what ifs. As a single working mother, I can tell you I had no time in those years to read anything but the LA Times, and visits to the library were rare. But my parents, who were still avid readers, moved out here from Michigan, and they often took the boys to the library. In the mid-'80s, with the kids grown and gone, and feeling like an aging Mary Tyler Moore, I chucked retirement vesting and moved to a small startup, which later became part of McGraw-Hill. Lucky me. I worked as a technical writer, developing computer training for the then fledgling PC market. I don't know how it is now, but then you could make really adult money as a tech writer. I say adult because this is probably not news. Novelists don't make much money. I found out at this year's LA Times Festival of Books that only 300 novelists in the United States are able to support their book, Murder in Los Lobos. That special feeling of place is still true for me, be it waves dashing against the rocks, or maybe a library, or maybe a restaurant like this. This would be a good place to hide a body under a table. Murder in Mariposa Bay has several scenes in the Los Lobos, which is really the Los Osos library. Here, I summarily replaced Joe Lorenzi, and I know a lot of you know Joe. He casts a large shadow. Manager at the time, with Neil Grail, a very romantic and fictional librarian from New Zealand. Next, I started to think about the type of mystery I would write. Thriller? No, not yet. Police procedural? Too technical. Private detective? Overdone, in my opinion. Noir? Fun to watch in films, but I'm not crazy about the books. Oh, cozy? Okay. But many, especially the British ones, are talk, 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 talk. Of course, there are exceptions. And we talked about Dorothy L. Sayers. I decided to combine subgenres and create a suspenseful cozy with lots of action. But we all know the devil's in the details, right? I also had to deal with the time period. Future? Nah, not my cup of tea. Historical? Not appropriate to the plot. By default, it had to be modern. I also had to think about who my protagonist would be. And I will say Bella Kowalski just kind of arrived from the heavens. She's Bella because I love your name. She's Kowalski because that's a famous sausage in Detroit. She's married to a former cop, which gives her more reason to poke around for bodies. She's of a certain age for a reason. If I can't get in touch with my inner child, I most certainly will not be able to get in touch with my inner millennial. So I decided, a certain age. She's also an obituary writer. One more reason for her to poke around for bodies. But what's her shtick? What makes her special? Every modern mystery protagonist has a shtick. Knitter? No, too quiet. Quilter? No, we already have one of those in the Early Fowler mysteries. Scuba diver? Yeah, she's afraid of water and she can't swim. It took a bit of thought, and then I stumbled on 2 books by spiritual writer Karen Armstrong, who is amazing to me. The books were Narrow Gate and The Spiral Staircase, about her years in religious life. And again, reading these books was a life-changing event. I have copies of both of those books, and I love them. Also, I used to visit my aunt. She was a Dominican nun in her convent in Wisconsin, even after I was an adult. She was there for 77 years. They sent her when she was 12. I mean, what do you know when you're 12? But that's what they did then, one child. went to religious life. I had plenty of memories to draw on from these visits, some of which eventually found their way into my current work in progress, Murder in a Safe Place. Also, I met a couple on a trip to Florida, a former nun married to a former priest who got married when they were 60 years old, and they were very good about sharing their stories with me. The only thing I can say about them was I wish I'd been a fly on the wall in their wedding night. 60 years old, former religious. Expose me away. That's how my mind works. So what can I say? Okay. When I start to write a novel, any novel, I know the beginning, and the beginning is when something changes the status quo. Say somebody leaves town, or someone comes to town. A lot of Western literature is based on somebody leaving town or somebody coming to town. Or someone has a secret. More Western literature is based on secrets. Or tell, and somebody else doesn't want it told. And I usually know the ending, or I think I do. But sometimes it changes. The middle is the hard part. And any writers in this room can attest to that. The scene of the crime, the victim, the murderer, his or her motive, and motive is very important. You can make a character do anything, but you need a strong why, or your reader is going to be unhappy. I need suspects with motives, including red herrings. And we all know what those are. They're like clues that go nowhere. And everybody's alibi, which leads to more red herrings. I need a strong conflict that leads to the crime. And that conflict should also, the solving of that conflict should also lead to the solution. The climax, of course, is the emotional high point. And I have to tie up all the loose ends of the crime, if not the characters' lives. No one believes in happily ever after in today's world. When I finished Murder in Los Lobos in 2008, I had a couple more ideas, so I decided to make a series. The second book, Murder at Cuyamaca Beach, was born out of time spent as a volunteer for the homeless. Nothing makes me so grateful for what I have as an overnighter in a homeless shelter. I come home and I have a couch of my own to read or watch TV or do nothing. More importantly, I have a bathroom of my own. When I visited my aunt in Wisconsin, they didn't have bathrooms just of their own. They had community like school bathrooms. I can't imagine living someplace for 77 years without your own bathroom. I can take a bubble bath, or I can take a hot shower instead of a quick shower at a public facility. So I have a great appreciation for the homeless and their problems. And I've heard some amazing stories of why people are homeless. And I'm so glad that they're able to get books. I think that's just grand. I have to admit that Murder in Mariposa Bay, the third book, was born of my fascination with the mafia. I'm from Detroit, right? I actually went to school with Grace Tocco, and I don't know how familiar you are with mafia culture, but they were like the leading mafia family in Detroit for several years, and they're still very strong. Grace Tocco just died, but she and I looked alike. We looked a lot alike, and I'm thinking, again, what if I was a kid and I looked like this mafia princess? But we'll see. But when I started to think about this book, I thought, what if the mafia moved in on the Los Lobos sewer contract? I said it in 2010 for deniability. Nobody said anything. The good thing about writing a series, you already have a cast of characters you really know. The bad thing about writing a series, you have to have a cast of main characters you really know. They're like relatives. These characters have baggage, and that baggage gets harder and harder to drag around. Mike, Bella's husband, is a good example. And that's all I'm going to say about Mike right now. People often ask me, is Bella me? I think the question is really, and it becomes more and more, am I Bella? Someone said this, give me 12 novelists by the same writer, and I will psychoanalyze him. Well, I've got like a third of the way there. I will say this, Bella and I both have an English grandmother, and we both love a good cup of tea. And so you can make of that what you will. So what's next? By the way, I'm chewing on a cough drop. Is that noise distracting? No, oh good, because I had a really bad cold and it's affected my voice a little bit. I'm almost finished with the 4th book. I heard a series of 4 recently described as a quadrilogy. And this book is something different for me, a psychological suspense novel. Most of Murder in Safe Haven takes place in a cloistered convent in Detroit. But there is a Belle Lousing. Pretty much here, I created my own world based on my observations at my aunt's convents. And there's a lot of things that go on that you would be surprised about. You know, personality conflicts, one nun taking you aside and saying, well, let me tell you about Sister Constance, or let me tell you about Sister Anne. You know, people are people, no matter where. But when you're a writer, everything is grist for the mill. Everything. And I'm a little bit behind with Murder in Safe Haven, but I hope to have it out by the fall. I should. There's a 5th book, Bella book planned. No plot yet. Set in 2015, when Bella is a bit longer of 2. I'm thinking maybe she works for a PI, or she's getting a PI license. If the character develops legs, he or she gets invited into another book. If they don't, they aren't. For example, in Murder in a Safe Haven, Sister Stacy started out as a small walk-in park. But she developed legs, and she just kind of took over. So you'll definitely see more of her in the 5th book. In fact, Stacy is going to become Bella's new sidekick. That's another thing I really didn't talk much about, but every PI, every amateur PI, needs a sidekick. The sidekick is the person that, excuse me, every PI needs a sidekick to stand guard while the PI is breaking and entering or doing whatever she's doing. And that sidekick also performs a very valuable role. Who'll say, are you kidding? What do you think you're doing here? That's kind of the leveler, the person who has some sense. Okay. For me, the libraries and the people who work here continue to be amazing, and I am even more amazing after hearing about all of the things you do. It doesn't surprise me, but it was wonderful to hear. I remember Roz Perini, the girl, everything undone. That doesn't get it for me. One more thing. Just like Saturday, Lorelei Brandt told me at an author's fair she hosted at the Cayucas Library that she runs that small branch all by herself with the aid of only a group of volunteers. They don't have a friends group. It's a small library, but you know what? It's full of books and full of people, and those books all require tipping, and so do the people. This sounds to me like running a small hotel with only a group of volunteers. And again, it just blows me away. I'd like to leave you with a couple of thoughts. Librarians, volunteers, friends, supporters, you are all on my short list of heroes. You make the book experience happen for the rest of us. Oh, and by the way, I'm running against Hillary for president in 2016.